Hi everyone, a new Diablo 4 season is starting, and for that I want to bring you a new updated 1 to 100 leveling and progression guide. If you want to reach level 100 fastest, this is how you do it. Here's some footage from me playing in season 2 for the race to world first. I was actually the first solo hardcore player to do it, at least of my knowledge. It took me 20.5 hours using this strategy. So you can get to level 100 pretty quickly and then do whatever else you want. And I actually expect to be even slightly faster than that going into season 3. So first things first, if you have not finished your Renown, this is always going to be the first priority. So in case you have not done that in a previous season, you're like a new player, or maybe you're starting hardcore for the first time, or something like that, you have to do your Renown. So get all the altars, get all the exploration, get maybe all the strongholds. Those are like the most efficient steps, and then finish whatever else is left. So you have Renown level 5 everywhere. But if that is not one of your concern, then you can jump straight in. So here at the start, you always want to start with the season quest line. At least until you get to a point where you get the construct unlocked. So somewhere along the way, as you level through the seasonal quest line, you're going to unlock your seneschal companion, and they have this little robot following you around and doing stuff for you. Now, it is unknown right now how long you have to go until you get it, but I guess it's going to be relatively early. And we also don't know how easily you acquire all those like governing and tuning stones, like the skills and stuff that the companion can use. But the idea here is you get that thing, you get like kind of something that works, you know, something that does something. You're not going to unlock everything right from the start. And then you just start blasting to level 100 basically, and you can figure the rest out later. Now, of course, if there are certain like stones that you really want for your build, for example, the resource stone, and you couldn't get it yet, then you might want to do some more of the seasonal, like, you know, quest line and seasonal like zones and stuff until you get at least that stone. But for the most part, I think it won't really matter. We're not really sure how strong the companion will be, if it's actually going to do any kind of damage. But my recommendation is, at least based on the season 1 and the season 2 quest lines, you should not waste too much time with the quest line and rather focus on leveling if you want to be fast to 100. Now, of course, at some point you want to finish the quest line, so you can just as well do it at level 1 as well if you really want to. Then comes the second step, and that is unlocking your Codex Powers. So basically you want to go around and do certain dungeons. For example, you see here I'm doing Jalal's Vigil, playing a Twisting Blades rogue. This one gives you the Blade Dancer aspect. So unlocking the right Codex Powers for your build, leveling up, is pretty important, because like this you can always get exactly the stuff that you need, especially like your skill specific aspects, for example. There's also going to be a few things in the seasonal journey, so keep that in mind. Right now we don't actually have the list of what is going to be in this journey, so there might be some cool surprises. But overall, you're going to do something like between 5 to 10 different dungeons just to unlock those Codex Powers. If you feel too slow at the start, you can also go from World Tier 2 to World Tier 1. Generally, I recommend starting in World Tier 2, because if you have full Renown, you have 10 skill points at level 1, you're going to be pretty powerful. But as you slow down, in case you slow down, depending on the build you're playing, etc., you can easily go back to World Tier 1. If those boss fights are too long, then just, you know, go to low difficulty, it's going to be much faster. But if you want to figure out which kind of legendary powers you want to unlock from the dungeons, you can always just go to our Maxwell guides here. We have this progression section, for example, in the endgame builds that shows exactly all the stuff that you need in the codex with the dungeon. You can click on them, they have individual guides, etc. Or you can use the map tool, you can also find them there. So in case you don't know where a certain dungeon is, you can just type it in there. Yeah, Chadal, for example, it's going to be up here on the right. So this is how that works. In the leveling guides, we also have some of those like powers listed. So if you go here and you select leveling, rogue, twisting blades, we also have the helpful like legendary powers and stuff like that also listed with dungeon. So like the top 3, for example, here in this guide, Blade Dancer for twisting blades, etc. So you can always find them here. And like this, you can kind of like make a little bit of a path of the dungeons to check off, and then you have those Codex Powers. So I recommend doing that as early as possible. Basically, just as you get started, you get like the seasonal quest line out of the way, you get those Codex Powers out of the way, you do your class quest, and then you're going to be at something like level 15, level 20 or something like that most likely, and you can start blasting pure experience. And the way this looks like is usually, well, a lot of domain tunnels. So once you're done with all those Codex Powers, you go to domain tunnels, or the so-called dopamine tunnels. This is in Skozulan, right above Serigar, and here you farm experience. Unless this is nerfed, we don't know, but there was nothing in the patch notes. This is going to be like the leveling up meta. It has lots of density, so you see this here. And if you have like an AoE clearing build or like some AoE clearing skills, you get XP extremely fast in there. This is definitely by far the best, and there is nothing that really comes close to it. Some people want to try whisper leveling. Of course, if you don't like grinding domain tunnels, you can do that, but it will be slower. Like, I've never seen a whisper leveling run that is like remotely close to what you can do here in the tunnels. And the thing is that once you already reach like level 20 or so, your goal is to get to something like around level 40 to 45 so that you can enter Nightmare Difficulty. And then you're already out of domain tunnels anyway. So you don't really have to spend that much time in there. At that point, it's like an hour, maybe 2, and you're gonna be done. But again, you can do whispers, you can also farm other dungeons if you really want to, but generally this is just the best. And then it comes to unlocking Nightmare Difficulty. So as you progress towards around level 40 or so, you can do it a bit earlier, even if you're like really powerful, or if the Seneschal companion is really popping off, who knows. Then you can go to Nightmare Difficulty. So you go to Cathedral of Light. You don't want to do it too early because remember, you cannot wear sacred items before level 45. They have a minimum level of 45. So even if you get there very early, well, you can't use any of the gear for a little while. So you don't really want to do it too early because you might just, struggle your way through and then die 5 times on the boss and all that. So usually I recommend around 40 minimum. And with all that done here, as you can see, I'm playing Twisting Blades Rogue. This was the Season 2 start, and it took me pretty much exactly 4 hours to do all the stuff I just explained, with unlocking a lot more Codex Powers than needed, to be fair, and also doing almost the entire seasonal quest line. And I was in Nightmare Difficulty here, around 4 hours in. Now at that point, you're gonna start blasting Nightmare Dungeons as soon as possible. Now you can also do Hell Tides, but they're not really effective for experience, and also in World Tier 3, Hell Tides are not really rewarding in terms of living steel. So you should pretty much ignore that. Instead, you can maybe try to get a bit of gear from like easy outdoor events. You can do, something like the seasonal zones here that was really lucrative back in Season 2 at least. And you get easy like starter gear, sacred items to get going in Nightmare Difficulty. So try to acquire some of those hero items as soon as you are in Nightmare Difficulty. You want to try to get at least like a decent weapon, maybe a few armor upgrades, and you're gonna have a much easier time like very soon after entering Nightmare Difficulty. So the start might be a bit of a struggle if you're low level gear, but there are like massive item power jumps basically entering a new world tier. So you want to try to capitalize on that, get a few items from some easy sources, as I said, for example, events, and like this, you're going to be powerful enough. You can also combine this with whispers, because the first time you start out in the new season, you need to craft the first Nightmare Sigil before, or you need to find the first Nightmare Sigil from whispers before you can actually start running Nightmare Dungeons. Nightmare Dungeons is the ultimate objective. Nightmare Dungeons is where you get by far the most experience. So that is usually the target here. So you do a few whispers that will also maybe give you some sacred loot. And then whenever you feel ready, around level 45 or something, then you can go into the Nightmare Dungeons. So you do 1 round of whispers that has an, I think, near guaranteed chance to get you a Nightmare Sigil. If you don't get one, just do another round of whispers until you get your first sigil. And then it's time for Nightmare Dungeons. So you want to start with tier 1. And the tiers that you want to farm are between monster levels 0 to 10 levels above your character. So you never want to fight monsters that are below your character's level, because you're going to get a huge XP penalty. But you can also get a bit of a bonus for fighting higher level monsters. This is especially strong in the early levels. So if your character is strong enough to actually handle, for example, when you're level 50, you want to fight level 60 monsters, then this is superb. Now, this may be a bit difficult early on, because usually characters start scaling a bit harder towards the late game. Nightmares basically progressively become easier. So at the start, it may be a bit too much to go plus 10 levels, but maybe you have a relatively powerful build, maybe you got some lucky drops, etc. This is the target. You don't want to go above 10 levels above your character, because there is no other experience benefit and you're just slowing yourself down. Even if it doesn't feel like much, it's just a waste of time basically. So in terms of Nightmare Dungeons, which ones do you want to farm? Well, we don't know exactly, but there are a lot of really good Nightmare Dungeons in this rotation right now, but Blizzard also has not said if they have changed any of them. So it could be that some of the good ones are nerfed, it could be that some of the bad ones have been buffed. At the very least, they said back in Season 2 that as they rotate in new dungeons every season, they would like, tweak them, change objectives, make them more streamlined, etc. But I have not commented on that at all in season 3. So they may all be unchanged. They may be, much better, who knows. But there are definitely some good candidates here. Mercy's Reach is definitely one of those top dungeons early on. Elderwood is pretty nice. Goa Ruins, these are like pretty fast, so you can level your glyphs early. Uldo's Cave is a very good XP dungeon. So those are some of the top ones, and also especially for group players, Champion's Demise is up there. And later, once you are in Torment Difficulty, you get even more Nightmare dungeons. So there's going to be Blind Burrows, there's going to be Dead Man's Stretch, that's also pretty decent. Gurun Canals, that was a really good one as well in the past. So there are a bunch of these dungeons here that are most likely going to be very good if you want to level up effectively. And in terms of like actually clearing those dungeons, usually you care about just like doing the main path and getting through there, just to like, get more dungeons done, get more glyph experience done. But if there's events like Cursed Chests, Cursed Shrines, those can be really valuable. They have been buffed in the past, and they're now really good if you want to level up quickly. Especially if your character doesn't move like a flash, you want to do those events because they spawn a lot of monsters and they're pretty good. And like this, you're basically just like blasting away through Nightmare Difficulty, kind of ignoring Whispers and Helltides as much as possible, because as I mentioned, you kind of want to farm them later in Torment Difficulty. You get a lot more Living Steel that you need for Duriel later. You get a lot more of those martial materials on the Whispers. So it's kind of recommended to just kind of like blast through Nightmare Difficulty as soon as possible and make sure you don't waste your time with the other stuff. And then once you feel strong enough, around level 60 to level 65 is usually the time to go and do Elias and get to World Tier 4. So that depends a bit on the build, again, depends a bit on your gear, but at least around level 60 or so, I kind of stop caring about sacred items if I'm still in Nightmare Difficulty. Maybe earlier, maybe just get like your first round of upgrades, and if they look decent, just roll with it. And you can kind of ignore most of the loot, just like, really run through, don't really sort out items that much, because you're not going to keep those sacred items anyway very soon. But here, for example, in this clip, I was level 64 when I went for Elias, and that is usually a relatively smooth time to do it. And you're not going to have such a hard entry into Torment Difficulty. So whenever you feel ready, you can do that. But again, depends on the build, depends on how powerful you are. And then you enter Torment Difficulty. So at this point, you need to know that defenses become a lot more important, in particular resistances. So as like a general gearing tip at this point, you want to stack up resistances as much as possible so that you get rid of this penalty that you have and actually, are protected, because you're going to fight like level 75 plus monsters at this point, and you are expected to have your resistances up, you're expected to have your armor up. So prioritize some more of those defensive rolls on your gear, which may not have been so necessary early on. And then you do kind of like the same thing that you did earlier when you entered Nightmare Difficulty. So you can maybe do like a Helltide to get a few easy ancestral items, can maybe do a few Whispers, so you get some ancestral weapon. Maybe a world boss is popping up, so make sure you use those opportunities, do a few events, get an ancestral weapon, get maybe like 1 or 2 like nice armor upgrades, and then it's basically back to Nightmare Dungeons again. So as soon as you're ready with that, you can just go back to Nightmare Dungeon farming, and you do exactly the same strategy with farming monsters 10 levels above you. And effectively, what I described earlier, the higher level you are, the easier it becomes to actually fight monsters that are 10 levels above you. So if you are still too slow and too weak, then you might not want to go for high level monsters that much. But over time, it becomes easier and easier as you have access to more powerful paragons. Especially level 50 itself is like a huge breakpoint, and then maybe later on you're going to get like a first really important legendary paragon node, you get your first important glyph, etc. So also try to maybe use those breakpoints and those power spikes that you get on the way to actually crank it up a little bit and go faster. And from here on, it's basically just like the Nightmare Dungeon grind. So if you want to be fast and effective, then Nightmare Dungeons is what you're going to do. I just explained to you there are some dungeons that are better than others. We don't know 100% of like the exact list and the distribution of like what are the best dungeons yet, but I gave you some examples. And I will also have an updated Nightmare Dungeon tier list for XP farm and for cliff leveling for you very soon, and here on Maxroll. And I understand not everyone's objective is to race to level 100 the fastest way possible, and I guess most of the people that actually want to be first probably don't really need to hear the stuff I said in this video. But I figured it would be a really, good refresher, at least for a lot of people, to understand, how stuff works, what you want to do to actually get to 100 if that is your objective. Now, you can definitely divert a bit, as I said. You can, you know, start doing more health tiles at this point, get some more of those living steals. Maybe you want to farm one of those bosses that does a certain unique for your character. So, you know, certain builds want, for example, the new uniques from Beast in the Ice now. You want maybe the Varshan rings for Sorgs and Necros, etc. So it can definitely be worth to go a bit off the path, try to do a few whispers, try to do a few hell tides, run those bosses a few times, maybe in a rotation with some friends, or with other people that are randomly around, because there will be a lot of people that want to get those uniques from some bosses. So if you have some materials, it's best to just multiply your amount of boss kills by inviting other people that also have their own materials. And then you can get your huge power spikes yet again and can go back to Nightmare Dungeons. Now, there's one unknown factor here, which are the vaults. Right now, I don't really expect the vaults to be very good experience-wise. So I kind of doubt they have any kind of bonus like the Nightmare Dungeons. Nightmare Dungeons just give more experience, they have good density, and they give you 80% more like bang for your buck, basically. So this is why Nightmare Dungeons are just so powerful. And on top of this, they also level your glyphs. And we kind of want to level your glyphs. So as you progress towards the 100, you're also going to do higher tier dungeons. And while you can kind of ignore Nightmare Dungeons very early, I would say that at least once you reach like 80, 90 or so, you really want to start focusing more on Nightmare Dungeons, just so you also get the glyph levels up. And there has been a Nightmare Dungeon glyph experience buff late in Season 2, so that should make it actually easier to get your glyphs all the way to level 15 at least, so get all of your glyphs to 15, and then whenever you have time, whenever you're farming more, get them to 21. And like this, you should actually end up with all of your glyphs ready to go once you are level 100, once you have your full Paragon set up. And that's also pretty much it for this guide here. So at that point, it's just smooth sailing. And you see here, this was the original clip from Season 2 when I dinked level 100. So this was 20.5 hours. And I did pretty much exactly all the steps that I have just described. And I think at this point, I even had the entire like seasonal quest line done and all that. So I actually did a bit more than I had to, basically. Back in the season, because it was not really that necessary to unlock everything right from the start. Or just leveling up without doing like high-end content. You know, you can always just grind out your Seneschal Companion later once you're level 100, I would say, and actually do like the highest difficulty stuff that probably gives you the best stones and the most stone XP and all that. But again, we'll see exactly how the vault turns out. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is it. So I wish you good luck in Season 3. I'm going to be blasting. I'm going to be live streaming. I'm going to try to race for World First on Hardcore. Let's see how that goes. So hope you like this and see you guys next time.